Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 11/11/2020 Mother Mary message. My name is Samarah Grace, and I've been channeling Mother Mary since 1997. I'm dating myself, I know. But it's been an incredible journey, and I've gotten to meet people from all over the world who vote for love. That's kind of my message these days. Vote for love, vote for community, vote for friendship, vote for well-being, and do that with every action and every thought that you have, because that's what ultimately will win. So welcome to 11/11. It is sort of a strange and wonderful time, but before we move on, I want to say my special thanks to all the veterans, to those who have served before, to those who are still serving, to those who will serve. We owe you an incredible debt of gratitude. And I know you haven't always gotten the respect and thanks that you deserve. And from my heart, and I think with all the people that are on this call or listen to Mother Mary messages, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you. And I can't imagine what it's like to put yourself and your body and your being in that sort of danger. And I wish we didn't have to do that ever again. But I just want to say from my heart, thank you. The other thing that occurred to me as I was thinking about all of our veterans is that, you know, if we hadn't learned how to move on and how to forgive, where would we be with Germany? Where would we be with Vietnam? Where would we be with Japan? And I think it's just a time to think about that and to think about how at one time they were our fiercest enemies, and we were wishing such ill of each other and ready to destroy each other. And now it's a different time. And although it may feel for many of us like, you know, like things are so hot right now in the world and there's so much challenge, you know, between the virus and everything else, and then, you know, our US election and everything that's going on with that. But the word that came to me to share with you, and I know Mother Mary will have an even deeper take on it, is both forgiveness and steadfastness. Like if we can hold true to who we really are, if we can maintain a sense of love and a sense of understanding about what would lead other people to do such desperate things, maybe we can find some balance in that equation and move on from there. And so one more thing before I bring Mother Mary in, I wanted to share something I wrote back in 1997, but this is Samarah's poem. And again, at that time, there was so much happening in the world in terms of bombing each other and doing all sorts of crazy things, and my heart was just hurting. And so I wanted to say something. So this is my call to common ground. And I just take a moment on this beautiful Veterans Day, and wherever you are, whether you're by yourself or with loved ones, just please take in this loving message. But it begins with, this is a time of chaos. This is a time for healing. This is a time of choice. This is a time to care. This is a time to stand and say yes. This is a time to stand and say no. This is a time of challenge. This is a time for peace. We join together, old and young, frail and strong, hearts and hands, to heal the wounds we have wrought for centuries. There is blood in our waters, acid in our lands, death in our skies. But now we join together to take up the sword of truth and the shield of light, to dissolve all boundaries, deceit, and judgment, to stand united once again, I and thou, in the garden of brotherhood. The human heart is common ground. So that's my offering to all of us on 11/11. And now I'm just going to close my eyes and bring in Mother Mary, and hopefully she'll be able to give us some guidance about how to ignite our light in a time that certainly is asking a great deal of many of us. Well, you know, how does one ignite one's light, right? There's many, many different ideas about that, but I think the simplest thing would be this acknowledgement that you are always a light. Now, how bright is that light shining? For some, very bright, for others, not so much. So what determines that? Well, I think it's sort of like understanding a plant. If you haven't given yourself enough nurturance, enough water and food and sunlight and air and all of that, a part of you withers. And that's your spirit. That's your spirit. But it affects your body. Therefore, it affects your light. So how do you nurture your spirit in a time when there's so much, you know, noise and chaos around you? Well, I'm going to do a couple of different ideas because we have people from left brain, people from right brain, you know, on the call. If you look at today's date, it's 11, right? But if you look at the numbers, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 0, 2, 0. You're thinking, well, so what? The 4 ones make a 4, and the 2 2s make a 4. So together they make 8. So how do you weave together 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 2, and what's the 0, and what's the 2, and what's the 0? Well, I'd like you to look at it this way. All around you in this exact moment in your history and in your creation, you probably have at least several other people in your life that share your viewpoint. So we'll call that the first 4. And then around you, whether at work or, you know, on television or whatever, you may have another 4 and you think, oh, you know, they're crazy. I don't like them. Look what they're doing. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. So right now, those are separate, right? They're separate. So how do you create common ground? How do you create a 2? A simple way to look at this is that although you may not agree with someone politically, although you may not share their views even religiously, you might not share their religion or their country or whatever. But if you, in your own mind, said, I'm going to ignite my light this year, and you began to recognize that there's at least one of the 4 with which you may have something in common. What is it now? I'll give you just a very tiny example that's very mundane and small, but yet it gives you the illustration of what I'm talking about. Almost every day, Samarah goes to this lovely place where she can walk, and there's a lagoon, and there's trees, and there's people fishing. So a couple of days she was over there walking, and it was the day that Biden was declared the president-elect, which is still, you know, a little bit of mess. But in that time here in Arizona, at least half the people voted. You know, they still haven't decided who's Arizona for or against, so there's still some of that going on. So there at the park, as you're walking around, as she's walking around, there's fishermen and families and this and that, and it's not a political place at all. But she went with the intention to make a connection with someone that she wouldn't ordinarily perhaps connect with. So as she rounded the bend, there was a lovely gentleman, a lovely black gentleman by himself fishing. And she thought, what could I do? What could I do? He's one of the other ones, in a way, at least in terms of how the country often operates. And so she directed her energy toward him, and he wasn't even looking up just yet. And she smiled and said, good morning. And there was a moment before he even turned around because he was fishing. He wasn't thinking anyone would speak to him. And then he turned around, and Samarah smiled at him and said something like, you know, It's a beautiful day, isn't it? And his eyes shifted from a certain shadow presence to being present, because there had been a connection, even that small moment. And they both smiled, and Samarah walked on. So what I'm saying to you is that in this coming year of 2021, if you can realize the way to create common ground, the way to create connection with those who are in some way other than you, whether it's a different color, a different religion, a different country, whatever. If you have the intention to find a bridge, to build a bridge, to make a connection, however small, you become kind of an ambassador of kindness, oneness, love. And so soon, over many people doing that, and I know some of you are already doing it, but this is that additional understanding that there are some who still think of themselves as other than you, and vice versa. And so by joining one at a time, as you feel to do so, as it seems right to you, not to try to make them like you, not to try to make them believe the same things that you do, not to convince them that they should have voted for this one or that one. But the common ground is humanity, and the human heart is common ground. And so in that process, what you're doing is building bridges so that no longer is this divide with a chasm between, keeping people from any sense that this is really not only one country here in the US, but one world. And so I'm inviting you to kind of see it in that way, that you can be a connector, an ambassador, without having any political agenda. And certainly without trying to convince someone of anything, but just finding that common ground. The second thing that I think I would love to see you do is to realize what's the zero. We talked about the 11 and the 11, which is 4 and 4 in terms of how it looks, right? So you have 2 and then 0 and then 2 and then 0. The 0 is the fictional story. Some of you are saying, what? So the fictional story is the story that has been told, which had perhaps some elements of truth at one time, but is no longer true. Here in the US, as each wave of immigrants arrived, they were often seen as the lowest of the low and given certain slurs of their background or their ethnicity or even their religion. Terrible things were said. Why? Because that's what had happened to the generation before. And they thought, well, if I've got that experience, then I'm just going to dish it out. And so they were treated horribly, each one, whether it was the Irish or the Italian or the Chinese or the Jewish people or the Muslims. It was like, oh, you're whatever. And so the 0, the other thing I would love you to try to do this year, and I think those of you that love computer coding are going to love all these 1s and 0s, is to erase that old story and meet people in a new, fresh way. And what does that mean? It means not immediately believing that if they're a certain color or a certain religion or a certain ethnicity, then all of this other story has to be true about them. And therefore, as you can see already in this country, there's all of these stories ricocheting around that are keeping people from just accepting each other and operating around what is true now. Now, certainly, if someone is stealing, from a store, then they should be arrested and, taken to the courts and all of that. I'm not saying to accept behaviors that are not appropriate, but to lose the story of what you think that person may be that you haven't even met, or you certainly don't yet know. And it's going to give you an opportunity this year to meet heart to heart and to find out the real story that's going on with them, what's really happening for them in this life. And certainly, if you find you don't enjoy their company, I'm not saying you have to be their best friend. But what I'm saying is all of the old stories are keeping that big zero between the two and the two. So now you're saying, well, Mother Mary, what's the other story? The other zero. And that's yours. The other zero is what you still believe about yourself that is somehow limiting you. And therefore making your light less desirable. Well, Mother Mary, I couldn't do that, Yes, you can if you want to. So this year, I'm really inviting you to look at the story that you believe about other people. And this year has been especially horrific in terms of what in the US, the Republicans have said about the Democrats, and similarly what the Democrats have said about the Republicans. And so now it's like, you just get a headache even thinking about it. So in this time of 2020 moving into 2021, the one on the 20 of 21 is the new beginning. It's really being yourself, being the truth of yourself, being honest and open with other people, not making assumptions about them. Certainly trusting when they do something that that's what they're doing. I'm not saying, cover your eyes and cover your ears, but be open to a new story for yourself and therefore then for the world. Because all of these old grudges and the old stories that you have between groups and also in your own heart and self are what is holding the world right now in this very angry, chaotic place. Meanwhile, the one and the one and the one and the one and then the two and then the two and then next year the new one are all about using your light, meeting the light of the other person. And what happens then in that kind of two is truly a magnificent bursting forth of light and creativity. Now, many of you experience that already with the groups where you're all together, you all think alike, but that's not going to cut it in the new year, because you will have factions and fighting going on among, no, my four knows best, no, my four knows best. No, no, no. Certainly enjoy the company and use your creativity, absolutely. But realize 2021 has been ordained for centuries to be the opportunity to really create the kind of world you want to live in for yourself and for your families and children and grandchildren and yet to come. And so what it takes when I talk about igniting your light, it really takes not only that understanding that you're perhaps still carrying around some old stories about what you couldn't do or what you're supposed to do or what you're capable of, along with stories about how so-and-so's behave and so-and-so's behave and they're against me and they're for me and da-da-da. And again, I'm not saying some of that doesn't have a basis in history, But this is a time to create a new story, a fresh new story. And the elements of that story are really about, how do I want to live? What do I value? Where will I put my money and my energy? How much of my love do I want to share beyond my current comfort zone? And if I'm not doing what I really want to be doing, whose fault is that? There's no one keeping you, truly, no one keeping you from establishing, creating, and living the life you would love. No one. It's the old story. Here in the US, again, and that's the easiest place to speak about because most of you are here, it's important to understand, even now, the technology that allows me to be with Samarah sitting in Arizona and talk with you here and all over the world is available to all of you right now. You can pick up your little cell phone and make a video and go on Facebook. You can do a podcast or a vlog or all of these things. And so what would you want to share? It could be a poem like Samarah shared with you a moment ago, because it made her happy to share something she had made. It could be a beautiful picture in nature. Many of you are doing that on Facebook. And it's important. It's like where you're putting your energy is what will grow. And so that's why we've spent pretty much our whole conversation so far on realizing, if you're not feeling bright, it's really about a couple of things. What old story about yourself are you carrying? And how much of the world's divisiveness are you carrying? And to shift that can be as simple as saying good morning with a smile on your face. Because in that moment, the new story is, hi, everyone deserves a kind word. That's the new story. So by doing this, you create sort of a beautiful, enveloping aura of light. And what that does for you going forward is it just really, I don't know, it sort of lights up your way, but it also lights up the way of others who are, just feeling like life's too much right now. And what the world is going to need in 2021 especially is a lot more ways to find common ground, and a lot less of this pointing fingers at each other and blaming each other for whatever. So the opposite of blaming each other is to say, okay, how do I want to live? What's the message I want to share? And again, it could be a simple good morning, or it could be making a video or a YouTube, or, whatever you feel. Don't let the world's upset stop you. Because as you can just imagine, in the past, the armed forces had on beaches, guns in their arms, bullets on them, praying that they wouldn't die. Some of them died anyway. So you live in a country where, although there is still violence and death, the vast majority of people can go on YouTube and feel pretty safe. So I just invite you to have more courage, to believe in yourself, to offer whatever it would be that is beautiful, that connects you with other people, and that allows you to say, I shared my light today. Because in the long run, That's how we'll no longer need wars. Because truly, what is a war but a desire to take what they believe they cannot have without taking it from you? So if you become the bestower of generosity, again, with kindness, with whatever you choose to give, the new currency that gets laid out into the world becomes a connection of kindness and compassion and caring and love. And in that environment, there's no need for war. And I know we're not there yet, but that's how we get there. So you ignite your light by deciding and choosing to share your love in whatever way feels right, and to not immediately imagine that if someone is of a different color or a different race or different economic situation or whatever, that they wouldn't welcome a smile. Smile anyway. I love Mother Teresa's poem, do it anyway. Just do it anyway. Because you will feel better. And you will know that you are an indomitable light offering kindness and good in the world. And that's your job. So be not afraid. It's a good time to be you. Much love. Namaste.